Hello everyone. Welcome to episode 10 of Learning Chess Classics. In today's video, we are going to see the game between Fischer with the white pieces and Benko. And this game was played in 1963. And Fischer is often considered as one of the greatest chess players of all time to have ever played this game by some of his fans. And we will see this game because over here we will see some brilliant attacking skills by Fischer and some decisive moments in this game. So in this game, the game started with e4, g6, d4, and bishop g7. Now Fischer's opponent chose a kind of a passive opening where he's chosen the fianchetto kind of a structure and not played in the center. So knight c3 and d6 was played. Now over here, white has options like going knight f3 and bishop c4, but Fischer goes for the move f4. He's taking more control on the center, and now he plans to play knight f3 after pushing his pawn to f4. Now knight f6, knight f3, castle was played, and bishop to d3 was played. Now over here, black has some options. For example, he can play the pawn to c6, and the knight can also come to c6. Black has some options over here, and even he can also consider a move like c5. But over here, black plays the move bishop to g4. He wants to get rid of this knight on f3, which is also controlling e5. So which means that black wants to get in the move e5, which is not easy at the moment because white has his pawns on d4, f4, and also the knight on f3 is controlling the square on e5. So after h3, he decides to take on the knight on f3. Now, why I don't consider this trade or this sequence very nice for black is because white firstly has a double bishop advantage and also he has a very strong center. So after knight c6, bishop e3, black does get in the move e5, and you have an option to take on e5 twice. But would you want to take on e5 twice? That is the question to all of you. Well, the answer is no, because after, let's say, d e5, d e5, and if you take on e5 again twice, now black gets in knight e5. His knight on e5 is very strong. He's attacking your queen and the bishop, and the pawn on e4 is isolated. And generally, there's a saying that when you have the double bishop pair, it is often good to keep the position open. And and over here, actually, the black knight is dominating, and black is actually better over here. So over here, what did Fischer do? Fischer took on the pawn once, and over here he plays the move f5. Now his plan is very simple. He wants to now attack on the king side. He wants to roll his pawns g4, g5, and this can actually get very nasty for black. So in order to avoid a king side attack, like no a pawn march on the king side, what his opponent did, he captured the pawn on f5. Now, here I would want you to pause the video and try to come up with a move that should you take the pawn on f5 with the pawn or with the queen. You have two options. So, if you take on this with the pawn, this is not a very good move, although it looks absolutely fine. But the reason why this is not good is because firstly, this pawn on f5 is preventing your pieces from controlling the f rank, the f file. But rather over here, black has actually some good counterplay because he can now sacrifice a pawn with the move e4. And let's say if you take on the pawn with e4, now black has this move knight to e5, attacking the queen. And let's say you play a move like you can take on f6. Now black takes on f6 with the queen, and this is actually not a very you know the advantage is lost over here because let's say over here you play a move like queen e2 maybe, and then you can simply take on the bishop, and black has enough counterplay. And if you play a move like queen to f4 over here, again you can simply take on d3 and white is doing fine. So over here, Fischer decides to take on with the queen, and over here black plays the move knight to d4. Now there is a free pawn hanging on e5. Fischer decides not to take this pawn, and I would like you to pause the video and try to come up with the reason why. because if you take on this pawn on e5, there is this move knight to g4, which is, it's a double attack on the queen. And after a move like queen to f5, queen to f4, trying to defend this bishop over here, you take, and now there is this very nice move queen to h4 check. Now, if you play a move like g3 over here, then black can simply go queen h5. The bishop on g7 is very strong. The knight is very well placed, and you are preventing white from long castling because you're looking at the square on d1. And of course, you're not going to short castle because this is always a weakness. So after queen h4 check, let's say you play a move like queen f2, and this is actually, even though black is a pawn down, but you can just take and play f5 over here, and black has enough compensation to at least know he has good fighting chances over here, and this is not going to be an easy win for white over here. So in this position, after knight d4, Fischer comes back with his queen to f2 and keeping all his all his plans intact. Now over here, black plays the move knight to e8 because f5 is a square which which can actually be an outpost for white. So the idea of knight e8 is that he wants to get his knight to d6 to have some control on this f5 square. And also there are some ideas that at some point black himself might want to play f5 to f7 to f5. So knight e8 was played. Now Fischer can castle either sides, long as well as short. Both the moves are fine. And in the game, Fischer played the move short castles. And over here, the move that was played was knight to d6, taking control of the square on f5. And over here, this queen is there on f2 right now. Oops, sorry. The queen is on f2. Now, the ideal square for this queen is actually to be on the h5 square because you are looking at the h7 as well as the f7 square. So over here, Fischer does a very nice maneuvering of the queen, which I personally liked a lot. He first plays the move queen g3. Now, of course, the plan is very simple. He's one of the plans is of course to play bishop h6 and launch a mating attack. So over here, king h8 was played. Now queen to g4 with the idea of putting the queen on h5. Black plays the move c6, trying to prevent white from getting in the knight to d5, which is a good square for white. And now he plays the move queen to h5. Now white's plan is very simple. He wants to take on the knight on d4, and after you take, he just wants to push his pawn to e5, opening up this bishop, and just planning a checkmate ideas. So over here, what does black do? Black plays the move queen e8, which is actually a mistake over here because black's idea is very simple that if you take on d4 and after a move like let's say e5 threatening a mate, he wants to block the mate with f5, you know blocking the bishop's diagonal as well as attacking the white queen over here. But queen e8 is of course a mistake because we will see why it's a mistake in the game. But over here, the correct sequence for black should have been knight e6. Over here, just trying to hold everything. Of course, white is still better after a move like knight e2. Like, white can double the rooks over here. The knight can jump to g3 and f5. White is definitely better and pushing, but black still has some decent chances of holding. But in the game, the move queen to e8 was played, and after bishop takes d4 and pawn takes d4, over here, I want you to pause the video. We have already discussed that why a move like e5 does not work because over here black has a very nice counterplay with the move f5. And after let's say you take the queen, black takes on with the knight. So now when you take it with the knight, not only are you attacking the white knight over here, but even this pawn is hanging. And this is going to be a disaster for white, and it's going to turn out into an equal endgame. So over here, I want you guys to pause the video and try and come up with the mind-blowing move that Fischer came up with. So over here, black is threatening a move like f5. So over here, what did Fischer do? Fischer played a beautiful move, rook to f6. Now this is a brilliancy because now you are preventing the pawn from pushing. And let's say over here you capture the rook over here. Let's say if you take bishop f6, now you play e5 and black has no defense to this checkmate on h7. Now let's say if you play a move like you take the knight on c3 dc3, again the same idea e5, and there is no defense to queen h7. If you play h6 check over here, you can simply play rook into h6 check. Now again, if you take on h6, then this comes with a checkmate. And if you do not take the rook on h6 and you play a move like king g8, there is again a very nice checkmate over here, rook h8 check, removing the rook because you want to get the queen on h7. So you remove the rook with a tempo, and after bishop h8, queen h7 is again a very nice checkmate. So after rook f6, we have seen that black cannot take either of the pieces. Neither can you take the rook on f6, neither can you take the knight on c3. So over here, the move that black played was king g8. Fischer here could have taken, I mean, Fischer here plays the move e5, threatening a checkmate over here. Now, rook into d6 is a move which you ideally don't want to play because you again play d into c3, and after e5 again the idea f5 comes over here, and you are moving into an equal endgame over here. So hence Fischer decides not to take the knight on d6, and rather he plays the move h5 e5 with the idea to take on h7 with checkmate. Now h6 was played over here, and now I want you to pause the video and try to come up with the move that Fischer played over here. And after this move, Benko resigned the game. Now, there are many ways to play. You might be thinking that you can just simply take on d6. Again, if you take on d6, black has the move queen into e5. And after queen e5, bishop e5, you are attacking the knight as well as the rook. You can simply go knight e4. And this is, of course, white is still winning this endgame. Like after bishop d6 and knight d6, you have two minor pieces for the rook, and this is going to be an easy conversion. But Fischer actually finishes off the game even faster. Now, if you are thinking of a move like rook into h6, again, over here, what black can actually play is now the move f5 over here. And again, this is also still winning for white, but again, it's going to go into a endgame because over here, let's say if you play the move e into f6, now this is going to be a disaster because black has this move queen e3 check, and you can simply trade off the queens over here, and you are in fact now an exchange down. But again, white is definitely still slightly better, but now he has to grind the endgame. And similarly, if you take on the piece on d6, again queen e3 check comes, and again you have two minor pieces for the rook, and this should not be a difficult conversion, but there is a simpler and a faster way to finish off things over here. Now we have seen that rook d6 and rook h6, but over here we see that in all the lines, the piece that black is actually attacking is the knight on c3. So over here, Fischer plays the very calm move knight to e2, and over here, Benko designs the game. Now, why is this winning? Because again, of course, you cannot take on the rook on f6 because if you take on, there's simply queen h6 and there is no defense to the mate on h7 over here. And let's say if you remove the knight anywhere, let's say you play a move like knight b5. Over here, white simply plays the queen to f5 and there is no defense to h7. So this is a completely winning position for white. And over here, Benko resigns, and Fischer wins the game ultimately over here. So with this, we come to the end. But it is important to understand that what was the turning moment of this game over here. If you see, what personally I like the most is that in this position, after gf5, Fischer decides to take the pawn with the queen and not with the knight, not with the pawn. And over here again, instead of taking on the pawn on e5, Fischer comes queen f2, and it is over here which actually grabbed my attention is how the wonderful maneuvering that Fischer did with the queen over here. He first goes queen g3 and then after king h8, how he got the queen to h5 to launch the attack on the h7 square, and then this was like after queen e8, which was a decisive mistake. The beautiful move that Fischer finds over here, bishop d4, e d4, and instead of playing a move like e5 directly, because if you play e5, we've seen that black has f5, so you stop the black pawn from pushing, and you play the move rook f6, and this is where the game entirely changes its course, and and after a series of good moves, Fischer eventually just wins the game with this beautiful move 92. So I hope you enjoyed the game as much as I did. With this, we come to the end of game number 10 of Learning Chess Classics. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And I will see you soon with more such games, more attacking games. And with that, I'll take your leave today. See you until the next classic. Thank you for watching.